we do encourage you to unmute yourself and chat with us. I'm gonna kind of talk about generalities of local food today, and then Mark's gonna hit us with what's actually going on in our community and in the state. And so that's kind of what we're gonna do today. So we're gonna talk about what local food is and like why do people buy local food, touch on farm to school, and then talk about some resources we had. You'll also see some pictures of some local places you can buy local food right here in Brunswick County along the way. So before we get started, I kind of wanted to see what you all think local food is. Like when you think local food, how would you define it?
Food that comes from around here. You know, I don't know what the mileage time is, but could be the seafood, or it could be from farms that are in your county or our county or around the state nearby.
Yeah, so geography is a big one. Anything else anyone thinks?
What about your local pizza joint? Is that local food?
Or some potato chips that come from down the road that were grown across the state. Or is that local food? No, these are good questions.
No.
No. All right, so local food is kind of hard to define. So everyone agrees that it has to do with geographic production area in relation to the consumer, whoever's going to consume it. So everyone can agree on that. Beyond that, there's a whole lot of disagreement amongst people. So much so that in 2002, there was a survey done where some guys stood outside a place and asked 120 people an open-ended question, like how would you define local food? And they got 140 unique definitions. And only 3% of those people identified state, county, or community boundaries as relevant local geography. So there's a wide variation among consumers as to what local food is. Federally, obviously, we also have some difficulty identifying what it is we call local food. And so in 2008, they said it's basically anything that travels less than 400 miles or is sold in the state that it's produced, essentially. Does that make sense? So the state in which the product is produced and travels totally less than 400 miles. North Carolina, we don't necessarily abide by that rule. I'm pretty sure, Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure NCDA and NC Extension considers anything within North Carolina. So we go by state boundaries.
So even Texas Pete is considered a North Carolina food.
Exactly.
It's produced and jarred and bottled right here in North Carolina, even though it's Texas on
it. So that's how we do it. And so then part of that is right. So you think about counties out west. Some of the counties out west are bigger than some of the states here on our eastern shores. So federally, we have a lot to think about. And then it's even different locally. You know, you think about the Tidal Creek Farmers Market over in Wilmington. They say nothing more than 50 miles is what we're going to consider local for our market. And so that the definition of local food is really hard to define. And geography doesn't always cut it because, like I said, only 3% identify boundaries, but most people have additional things that they're thinking of when they want to buy local food, which makes local food incredibly hard to research and to get any data around because there is no universally accepted definition. Like even if you went by this definition, each project you study is going to be different because they have different requirements, if that makes sense. So it's incredibly hard to research some of these things.
When I think of local, I think of something that's kind of like our area weather, where it's Northeast South Carolina and Southeast North Carolina. So I don't know exactly how many counties that would be, but that's what I think as local. So it doesn't quite reach out 400 miles, but anyway, it's all a perception of what you think.
Exactly. We all have a lot of opinions, you know.
We can reach into several states depending on where you are in North Carolina, and you put a 400-mile ring around it. Mm-hmm. So it's all different, isn't it? Oh, what was in the picture on the first slide? Who can identify those?
The oysters?
Oysters, that's right. So those are harvested locally, but a lot of the singles that you would get for oysters in a half shell come out of Louisiana or Virginia. But that's changing. So mariculture is providing more of those single oysters for specialty dishes right here in North Carolina waters through oyster farming, just barely off the coast and in the inland waters. Pretty neat. And what's on this picture?
Tomatoes.
A big old fat tomato for sandwiching.
That's right.
And other fun culinary experiments.
Right down the road in Supply.
Yeah.
So why do people buy local food? Why do you buy local food if you do? Why do your friends?
Well, when it comes to tomatoes, if they're nice and juicy and they taste like tomatoes, not cardboard.
And so you're saying that the quality is better?
Yes, but I find sometimes when I go to farm markets, it's not always local stuff.
That's what is local.
How are you defining it versus how are they defining it?
I never asked them that.
Mm-hmm.
But all I can tell is it seems like, the tomatoes might be coming from Florida or who knows where. But you can tell the difference when you bite into a tomato, whether it's a farm fresh tomato or it's something that's been frozen and transported. At least I can.
Well, for me, I like to support local businesses, whether it's farmers or the local hardware store, things like that. So I enjoy doing that.
Any other reasons?
Well, it's fresher. So maybe, it hadn't been sitting around in a truck, and maybe environmentally it's not, taking up all that oil and whatnot to get it there.
Less transportation costs.
Yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, so these are a lot of the common things that we hear, and that even reasons that I sometimes use, right? So it's more environmentally friendly, maybe it's less food miles, making it more environmentally friendly. Maybe it's more nutritious. You might can support some local farms and families, and even support the local economy, right? So these are all common reasons that we buy local. And so we're going to kind of dive into these a little bit. We might even have some spirited debate. I don't know. Mark and I have had a few spirited debates. They're all been good fun though. Particularly around this one.
Go on either side of the argument. So it's
that's right.
Fun to pick a side.
So particularly around food miles. So I think I heard somebody say something around around less fuel being used.
Transportation costs.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So research does not necessarily support that local farms are more environmentally friendly due to transportation. And there's two major reasons for that. One is that transportation only accounts for 11% of all gas emissions in agriculture, approximately 11%. The other is efficiency is more important than distance when thinking about moving products. And so if you can fill a ship with a lot of food, that's more efficient for economies of scale. So per product, you're using less energy than you would a farmer and consumers driving back and forth to the farmer's market. The other side of that is that most of the energy being used in agriculture occurs during production, processing, packaging, and selling, which you might not have. That's one of those tricky things. Depends on how you define local food, because Texas Pete is going to still have all these things. Where buying some peppers at the farmer's market, they're just putting them in a box and bringing them to the market. Anything I'm missing there, Mark?
So tractors, you're still gonna have tractors in a farm in Yuma, California, growing lettuce, like the greens that somebody would be growing around here. A larger farm would have more efficient tractors, potentially. A smaller farm might use more hand labor. So their energy comes from vegetables that are already produced on the farm. There's so many different ways of skinning that cat and different ways of doing things that it's really hard to put local foods in this box that we can take out and really investigate. So you can make different stories about different large farms, small farms, local farms, far away farms, but we have all those sizes and things around here. There are large vegetable farms that provide greens and sweet potatoes and tomatoes and all kinds of delicious stuff for really large institutions and really large markets. And we have super small places that only open up on Saturday, and you can come and grab a few carrots or turnips at the little unmanned, unstaffed little stand. So all that plays into it, and it's fun to think through and to also ask questions. So you can ask your grocer and you can ask your farmers market vendors about all these different things.
And then it's still around sustainability. Again, remember, local foods doesn't have a definition on how you have to grow at all. So the research does show that direct to consumer farmers, which again isn't all local farmers necessarily, or local food products, but direct to consumer farmers tend to be more likely to grow organic and be less likely to use pesticides and herbicides. And conventional farmers are more likely to have land in conservation and more likely to use no-till practices, which is environmentally friendly and sustainable. Anything you want to add there?
So these are all good things to consider and start a conversation around and to be open-minded about, because even organic growers use pesticides. They just use ones that are more biologically based. And you cannot do chemical-free farming at all, because technically water is a chemical compound. So growing practices are a separate discussion from strictly local decisions.
I also want to give a quick shout out to Meg Shelton here. She's a different type of local farmer. Most of the things she sells are through intermediaries, so restaurants. She sells to some restaurants, I believe, and she sells to Feast on East. But she also allows people to buy plants. So if you're looking to grow your own food, check her out. She's a good place to start.
Do you offer tips and techniques on growing your own food? I mean, not in this series, but anything that 4-H does?
It doesn't get any more local than your backyard. So,
yeah.
We definitely do.
Okay.
Not necessarily 4-H. I'm not that experienced, but we have people on our staff. Mark's a good one. He does ag, and then we also have a horticulture team.
Because I started composting with the idea that by next spring, I might have some good, rich soil to plant stuff in, but I've never gone any farther than that.
Well, you're farther than you were before.
Yeah.
And Morgan's selling herself short. She's got quite the little blueberry operation in her backyard.
Right. I do have a little backyard garden.
Extension can provide all those resources, no matter what county you're in. Call your extension office and we'll help you get growing.
Okay.
There's also a Borlaug scholar on the call today, so she may have some things to contribute. Oh,
the last thing I did want to add here is the the benefit of local farmers, and Mark even mentioned grocers, is that you can ask them. You can ask them how they grow. You can, most of the time you can visit their farms. If not, maybe you should have some additional questions. I was taking a class this semester on local food system. There was a farmer in the class, and she was like, that is the best way for me to get people to keep buying from me, is to have them visit my farm. And she's like, people who don't want you to visit, it's just a little bit different, but she's like, that's the best way for me to keep getting customers, is they see what I'm doing and how I'm operating. So ask questions, build relationships, and that's a benefit of knowing who your farmer is. I think, Paul, you mentioned supporting the local economy and local families. Just a little fun fact: nationwide, local food sales went from 5 billion in 2008 to an estimated 11.7 billion in 2014. More than doubled in 6 years, which is pretty wild for me to comprehend, at least. There is this thing called the multiplier effect, which, Paul, you touched on. It's like buying from small businesses. Small businesses are more likely to hire people who are local. Is assumed that they're going to hire local people, and small businesses are more likely to support other small businesses, research suggests. And so the estimated multiplier effect is $1.32 to $1.90, which basically means that for every dollar spent on local products, between 32 and 90 cent worth, there's an additional 32 to 90% worth of additional economic activity locally that stays local. Does that make sense? Okay. There's also an idea that there's a market spillover effect, but this is research suggests that farmers markets tend to get people to gather and then spend money at other businesses. That's hard to prove, because you can't prove that people weren't going to come to these businesses anyway. But I can say that from what I heard, Tidal Creek Co-op was very excited to get Tidal Creek Farmers Market back at their place on Saturdays, so they can have additional people coming in the doors. There's also some research that suggests that local food systems create kind of business incubators. And I think there are some cool examples of that here in our region. James Brunt Community College has what's called Eastern Carolina Food Ventures Kitchen, and that started with the help of the program that was prior to Feast Down East. And so that's like very little money up front to get started in a food business. And then another good example of that is a Feast Down East Food Hub, which is a low entry for farmers that I think Mark will probably talk about a little bit more now or later.
No, we'll do it later.
Okay. And then I also heard some things around quality, and I didn't really hear much about nutrition, but flavor. So there is a lot of research that suggests there's a strong correlation between local foods and health outcomes. But again, it's very hard to prove that that's because they're eating local foods, because there's so many factors to consider. If someone is explicitly buying local foods, they're probably just eating more vegetables. They're eating a variety of vegetables, and you can't prove that. It's just hard to prove. And so correlation isn't necessarily causation, but there is a strong correlation between those. Research also suggests that people who grow their own food are more likely to have stronger health outcomes. And so that's another plug for growing your own food in your backyard. And as far as
isn't that like the Amish effect, where you work all day in the yard and you can eat as much as you want?
Maybe so.
And you're stronger and healthier.
And then as far as quality and nutrition goes, it varies so much, because it all depends on what happens from harvest to when you consume it, when it hits your table. And so because local farmers vary, their storage types and their ability to store things also varies. Not every farmer is going to have the same storage facility. And so temperature and humidity levels are really important here. And that is what really comes into the freshness and nutritional value. And so it just varies very, very much. A benefit that local farmers do have is that they get to choose products more on taste than ability to transport typically. So they have a wider variety of products to choose from because they don't have to worry so much about transportation length and the ability for it to still look good in the grocery store in a few days. We also have the benefit of being able to really pick at peak ripeness, where sometimes conventional farmers don't have that ability. Mark, anything you want to add there?
The example is strawberries. If you had the choice, same price, same location, and you could have fresh local strawberries or strawberries coming out of Florida or California, which one would you pick?
Fresh local.
Local.
Well, and describe the flavor difference, flavor and texture.
When we buy, we go up to Lewis Farms, there's normally more sand in them.
So there's a story, right?
Well, that's eating them from the field.
I think they're sweeter. They tend to be a little sweeter.
They don't taste like cardboard.
All right, Marcia eats a lot of cardboard to be able to compare. There's better cardboard than other.
When you
But
go,
right, there's that it's mostly white, fleshy, rather than the rich red, which also brings in soluble compound, the sugary compounds that are there and such. So you get more flavor, more intensity of flavor instead of a bland, harder berry that has to go through all those food miles, the transportation and the time before it reaches your table.
when you go to like grocery stores like Lowe's, Food Lion, and they have a section that says local produce. Can you believe that?
Sure, and their definition is going to be different. So a lot of local campaigns for larger grocers are going to be your part of the country. So the entire southeastern United States is local for some of the grocers. So that means Florida strawberries are in their local section. At least it didn't come from the West Coast. But it could also be mountain apples and local seafood. All that could work into their local program at a grocer. So it's worth the conversation. Back to the berries, a lot of that's genetics. So that's a very different variety of strawberry, like Chandler or Early Glow or some of those others that are made for fresh picking and selling of strawberries right out of the field. The tomato picture came from Heritage Farms this spring. There was a line of people waiting because they weren't doing U-pick. So the workers were out in the fields filling buckets that would go onto a little golf cart, and the farmer's daughter would drive them up to the stand. And then like all the berry buckets just get swiped and bought and ran on. So those are like instantly freshly picked things versus the genetics that have to go into a berry that can handle getting packaged and jostled and cooled and shipped long periods of time and then into a grocery store. So it's a different berry. It's a different vegetable for things that can store well versus things that don't. So that's most of what those flavor and texture differences are for a lot of our fruits and vegetables.
Mark, you also touched on something else that I didn't plan to mention, but since you brought it up, I want to. You said that if there's strawberries that are the same price, which one would you choose? And oftentimes I feel like the view is that local foods tend to cost more. They're less accessible, they tend to cost more. And again, that's something that varies widely, unsurprisingly. Because it also depends on consumer demand and what consumers want. But it varies widely based on, land valuation, cost of labor, things of that. But research overall, on average, research suggests that local fresh fruits and vegetables that are sold in direct markets are less expensive than fresh fruits and vegetables sold in grocery stores, regardless of the season. So I did want to add that since you brought it up.
I did. I wanted to make the decision more based on the flavor. So, but yeah, right. So there's variations in that, but overall, hey, you're gonna get a better price from the person that's picking it and putting it right there at the stand.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Some fruits and vegetables maybe are coated to stay fresh longer or something, and that's always been my problem, that I can't, with fresh local things, I sometimes can't eat it fast enough and it spoils. So any thoughts?
Oh yeah.
Or one for the mulch pile.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you were trying to get more compost going. So Morgan is going to take a post-harvest physiology course this coming spring. She'll have some ideas for you. But washing your produce will help with that right before you eat it. So the sand that Paul talked about, that's something you want to do right before preparation. So wash it then, not before, depending on your own situation. Getting it directly into a refrigerator is key to that, because they picked it right at or right before peak freshness. And that means it's got a couple of days while it's at its prime. Some things can last way longer. Apples, winter squashes, vegetables tend to last longer than fruits. So there's another thing. So eat the fruits first, eat the stuff that's at the peak and about to go down on quality quicker than other things. Because once a piece of fruit or any part of a plant is picked, quality cannot increase. You cannot make that strawberry any more fresh, and it will start to deteriorate. You can't increase the quality after picking. You can change the way it looks. So bananas are picked green, tomatoes are picked green in most situations, and then ripened off the plant. That's ripening, but the quality will not get any better. If something took a bite out of that tomato before it got picked, it will not heal. It may seal up, but it will not heal. You can't get higher quality after being picked. So refrigerate it, whether that's in the crisper or different things based on those different species of plants, those different vegetables and fruits. And there's charts and stuff online. Search for fruit and vegetable storage and put in EDU on there on your search engine to pick from a actual research site would help a lot. So storing properly will help a bunch. So we don't have little cold houses anymore. We don't have just a little stream running through a shed or a root cellar to keep things cold. So you can keep those things in the refrigerator at a consistent temperature, and that'll help a lot. I'm talking too much about that. We got lots of stuff to chat about. Sorry.
That's great. Very informative. Love it. And then I want to touch on farm to school and health outcomes, because I also think this ties into our growing your own food and health outcomes. But farm to school is essentially getting hands-on gardening, education on gardening, cooking, and nutrition, and hopefully local foods in the cafeteria, on the cafeteria line, in school settings. Where this is being done, research shows that there's increased health outcomes among students, largely because they have an increased willingness to try fresh fruits and vegetables, and they're increasing their science scores. In a 2015 report to Congress, USDA Economic Research Service said that 4 out of 10 school districts were participating in farm to school across the country at that time. My assumption would be that it's increased, but I can't say that for certain. I think farm to school is gaining some traction, but I'm not 100% sure. Maybe not since COVID, but prior.
We just can't prove it. We think so.
Yeah, we think so. We can't prove it. We do a lot of farm to school in Brunswick County. We have some food corps service members that do a lot of gardening and hands-on lessons and are working to get local foods in the cafeterias. Our school system has done some local food purchasing. They did some this summer, for example, from Heritage Farms, the one with the big tomatoes. So we work on a lot of farm to school initiatives here in Brunswick County. And then lastly, in the same report to Congress, one thing that really stood out to me in the summary was, so this report was all about numbers. So like how much money, how big are these farms, who's making all the money, things like that. And then at the bottom, there was this one little paragraph, there were like two sentences where I was like, we didn't specifically study this, but one thing we found was collaboration is a common theme. And that the regions working in local food systems are building community partnerships, and so like we see many groups leveraging farm or state and federal programs. We see many nonprofits working with these groups. We see churches and schools and other local governments all working together to work on things. It's also bridging urban and rural communities sometimes, and allowing them to work on community concerns like food insecurities. And I think Feast Down East is a good example of that here in the region. I'm gonna let Mark talk about them.
I agree. I was gonna wait for the picture on Feast Down East, but yes, the more people talk about local foods here in Brunswick County, the more they have to bring in other people to make that happen. Like when Morgan was just talking about farm to school, when the school nutrition director wants to buy local and has for a long time, he talks to us and we talk to farmers and we talk to other educators to get the certifications that are required for making all that happen. So it's a much larger and slower project to do things locally than just, find the big produce grower and get me a whole bunch of beans in here to feed these kids. So it's interesting work. It's important work. It's collaborative work. So get involved. Find a farmer, hug them when COVID's over, and get to know their story.
So this is the Feast Down East picture, if you want to add anything else about them.
Oh, because hey, you're smart. I had my gallery showing. I was like, all I saw was should have figured that out. Sorry. Thank you. Feast Down East is a really neat collaborative effort around the UNCW social studies, not socialism.
Sociology department.
Sociology, thank you, department. They got that going years ago. Oh man, it's been like 12 or 15 years ago that they wanted to fix some of the issues in low-income neighborhoods and get food in there. So they had this retail operation going to get food into those neighborhoods. They had a wholesale operation going to get local foods into restaurants, and they were floating both boats. And they've had to switch mainly to wholesale, and that's been interesting. You'll see more and more restaurants, especially the ones downtown, and I don't want to say higher end, but restaurants with a story that they want to tell will find local foods through Feast Down East and their own relationships with farmers. And so it'll be Preservation Point eggs on the breakfast menu, or it'll be Heritage Farms collards on the lunch menu, or it'll be Northwest Land and Cattle tenderloins on the dinner menu. So they're naming where these things are coming from and telling that story and helping you feel better about your meal as a consumer, and being able to tell that story to your friends when they ask you about, where'd you eat last night? I went so-and-so and I had this great such and such from this and that place and this farmer. So they're telling that story, and that's neat. Other great thing about Feast Down East lately has been their produce boxes. They've done a CSA, a community supported agriculture project, since some of their outlets and channels have been disrupted from COVID. So you sign up online for a box of produce and you show up at a certain spot in Wilmington, and this truck, instead of going to restaurants, has a big stack of little boxes to just put in your trunk as a CSA participant. That's really neat. So you're getting the same types and quality of produce that they're shipping or getting to chefs for you and your family. So Feast Down East, they always have a local foods conference in the late winter, early spring. I just saw a mention about that in an email feed the other day. So they're already planning for that. That's a really good meal, by the way, because the chef guy at UNCW does all the cooking and uses local foods, and it is magnificently tasty. So go for the food and learn a whole lot while you're there, and that'll be fun. Yes, March 5th. So stick around for that. Feast Down East does a really good job. It's a big benefit to being right here in this area.
I also wonder if everyone knew what I meant earlier whenever I said food hub. I just kind of threw it out there. Does everyone know what a food hub kind of sort of does?
Mhm.
Just like the spokes on a wheel. So you got growers that are bringing produce to the food hub and trucks that are taking it out from the food hub to restaurants, to other retailers and things like that. So it's a link in the network of the local food system. We have one in Burgaw because of Feast Down East. So neat place for a tour if we're looking for food type tour ideas later.
Yeah, they also have like a flash freezer there and refrigerator system. And so it's just a nice way for farmers who don't have a lot of money to invest up front to do some things with their products. So it's really
For value adding, that's right. Yeah, Dave.
I think they're going to be virtual next in March, the conference. I think that's what it said. So I'm not sure how you'll get your delicious food, which is really sad. But
well, you can pretend. And then 2022, enjoy some really good food.
East Down East also has a mobile market now. They have a large van that has storage inside. It's refrigerated, and they go to a lot of housing authorities in downtown Wilmington or parks and other events. And they accept SNAP and EBT, and they actually have a double bucks program. So whatever SNAP dollars you spend, you can get double the dollar amount. So that way they're getting more fresh produce.
Yeah.
And some of that's based on donations and grant stuff. So remember places like that for Giving Tuesday.
That's right.
Okay, my turn on Meat Sweet. You can find local meats in all kinds of quantities from that website. It's a neat project for North Carolina, and also Cornell gets people from New York onto that site. And I typed in my zip code at home in Southport and put 50 miles out there, and there's a lot of good growers around with chicken and beef, and some of them are animal welfare approved and some of them are pasture raised. They got those little tags on there so that you can make your selections based on the type of local foods that you want. That's pretty neat. Give that a shot. There's even it's not a llama. No, that's a goat. Okay. I'm not, rather have an alpaca sweater. Okay, and then 10% campaign. How am I gonna figure out how to support all these local growers and this local food system? Oh, you could sign up for the 10% campaign, and instead of just 10% of your plate being local, because then you could just slap on a sweet potato, let's do something more easily defined and do 10% of your food dollars. So I signed up years ago. I got a sticker and everything. I still got a few extra stickers. So if you sign up, you come see me, I'll get you a sticker, bumper, tag, whatever. And put 10% of your food dollars into local foods. And that helps everybody out. And you're part of that demand, that's making that work. right here in southeastern North Carolina. So that's fun. And sweet potatoes are, okay. Sweet potatoes, North Carolina is like #1 in sweet potato production in the entire country. About half of the sweet potatoes that are in the grocery store at any point, anywhere, half of them come from North Carolina. So if you will spend 20% of your food dollars on sweet potatoes, then you will definitely check off the box of 10%. So that's sweet potato fries, that's sweet potato chips, that's straight up sweet potatoes, all kinds of stuff. Also, turkeys are big for us, and pork. So a lot of Smithfield's pork comes from right here. We even have farms in Brunswick County that contract with Smithfield's, all 10 of them, I believe. And I might have a dozen do that with Smithfield's. So when you buy Smithfield's bacon, you're supporting North Carolina farms and maybe even ones that come from right here. Got to be NC. I didn't mention that earlier. You can find Texas Pete on there, but also a lot of other great things. So Megan's going to put gottobnc.com in the chat box. You can find farmers markets there and agritourism opportunities, as well as growers and restaurants that use local. So that's a really neat website. They traditionally do a big festival in Raleigh at the state fairgrounds, and you can see some of the different things. I was surprised to see freezer pops in there one year.
So, that's a good festival. It's a lot of free samples.
Yes, right.
It's a good festival.
Straight nuts. And we should just take a van load up there when that thing starts again. So I got freezer pops and like crab cakes and all kinds, and pickles. Right, Mount Olive pickles go all over the country. So that's kind of fun. Put up some local farms here with some websites so that you can get a taste of what happens here. Visit NC Farms is a neat app that we're working on for right here in Brunswick, New Hanover, Pender, Robeson, Bladen counties, to get a listing of nearby growers that want to have you out at their place. So not just eat from these places, but actually go and visit them. So whether it's a U-pick operation for berries, or a place that has farm stays, or Duplin County, the Duplin Wines, or Lou Mill Vineyards, where you can stay overnight in a little cottage with a heart-shaped bathtub for whatever reason, those places are neat, and you can visit those farms, those working farms, through this app. Our listing should be up in early 2021. Shelton Herb Farm, we mentioned them. Indigo Farms is down on the border. They actually, part of their farm is in South Carolina and North Carolina. So when COVID restrictions keep you from going out of state, you can visit your South Carolina friends and North Carolina friends. They can come together right there at Indigo Farms, and nobody's breaking the rules, even though you all might get COVID. Well, it's a romance. Ludlum's is a fun little spot. It's a family business. A lot of these are transferred down. Benny is transferring over to Keith now. Keith is the son who's working on that. Little Boys is out in the middle of the swamp. So when you're driving up 133 to get out of here, or your friends are coming in, have them stop at Little Boys Produce. Little is the family name. So it's Mr. Little and Mrs. Little and their sons, Little Boys Produce. Heritage Fresh moved from on farm to a brand new building. They just opened up last month. Yeah, right there on Highway 17 in Supply. So check them out. Great little shop. Wonderful people. Excellent story. Check them out. Vacation Vittles. That is a really neat program where we're pitching to short-term rental folks through the realty agencies. So when they're signing up for their week-long stay right there on Oak Island or Holden Beach or Ocean Isle, they click a button that says, yeah, I would like a bag of produce from local farms to meet me when I get here. And so this group, Men and Women United, out in Columbus County gathers all this food from different farms, bags it up with the youth. The youth are like, I went last year and we were bagging and stacking and caring for this produce and getting it into to redistribute it out to these vacationers. That is just flat out neat. And they pick from farms primarily who encourage farm visits. So you can get sunburnt on the first couple of days and then go visit a farm when you don't want to be on the beach getting additional sunshine. Brunswick Catch, North Carolina Catch. We started the presentation with oysters, and well, I'll finish with Brunswick and North Carolina Catch, where you can switch to the next slide and see all the different spots that I put some of these on there. No matter where you are in the county, you can find some. But along the southern coast of Brunswick, we got fish houses everywhere. Not every bit of seafood that you're going to buy is going to be from local sources or locally landed. In fact, 95% of the seafood that is landed in North Carolina goes out of state instantly. So New York and Canada are the big markets for seafood, so it just hops on a truck and goes up there. In Brunswick County, most of our landings stay pretty local because we don't have high volumes of stuff, so it tends to stay in the area, and area meaning like inland a little ways, but not just stuck on a truck and headed out of state really fast. Brunswick Catch is more local. North Carolina Catch hits the whole coast, where there's a Brunswick Catch and there's a Outer Banks Catch and there's a Pamlico Catch and such. These different catch groups get fishermen together and drive demand for local seafood so that people know where they can go and who to ask for that local experience and to support those local commercial fishermen. It's a really neat thing, and we're part of it as Cooperative Extension here in Brunswick County. I just got back this morning from helping a grower down in a fisherman down in Varnamtown to apply for some CARES Act money for increasing capacity of their cold storage so that they can buy more local seafood and sell more to more folks that are coming in. Brunswick Catch is a great way to do that for you as a consumer. You can go on that website and find a fish house that works through Brunswick Catch and always ask for those local products. A lot of the restaurants that sell seafood here, a lot of that product is frozen and coming from somewhere else. But all of our Brunswick Catch member restaurants have something on the menu that's fresh and in season. So ask for that. Talk to the servers. Ask for the chef's opinion on things and see what kind of stories you get to be a part of when you're buying local seafood, as well as buying local produce from these farmers and considering North Carolina's produce as a whole and being part of that local food system right here in Brunswick County as part of that Feast Down East system, and got to be NC and all those other components of our local food system. So thank you so much for being interested in that today. I'm glad to have chatted with you about it.
Okay. If there are no other questions, Megan, I think we're done.
Thank you both so much. Did anyone have any last minute questions they wanted to add or something you want more information on?
All of these slides are the ones that had the lists and things are on your website?
I am going to upload this presentation to YouTube, and I will ask Morgan if she'll send me this presentation so we can definitely get those links easily accessible to you.
It was good stuff.
I have a question, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but you know, with all the stuff with Gen X and PFAS, and now they're saying that it's not just in the water; it's in the water, and it's in maybe the air, and maybe in the soil. So maybe it's in the animals, and maybe it's in the vegetables and whatnot. So is that a concern? I mean, should I be worried about buying local if it's grown with our water and soil and air?
Most of those PFAS contaminants are showing up in municipal water sources and stuff coming out of the river, right? So the Cape Fear River. most of our agricultural operations, you get their irrigation water from wells and from surface water on site. So not near the plant that's up the river. So those water sources are different. So it's worth a conversation. Some places will use municipal water in an emergency, but municipal water is way more expensive than your own groundwater, just pumping it. So that's part of that. Regardless of the concern, my own opinion, and this is just Mark, this is not cooperative extension. So I'll take off my extension hat for one moment and say, Mark Blevins is going to eat vegetables and fruits because it's good for you. So if I am going to limit my vegetable intake and switch over to something else like grains that are less likely to have whatever contaminant of the week, then I feel that my own health is worth the risk to eat a bunch of fruits and vegetables. And I'll put my cooperative extension hat back on and say that if everybody in the country would eat 5 servings of fruit and vegetables every day, we would not have enough farms to grow that produce. So let's test the system for resiliency and eat all your vegetables and fruits. So we have to make more farms. That would be incredible.
Thank you, Mark. Any last minute questions? We're going to wrap up here just to make sure we stay under that 1 o'clock mark. Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining. I encourage you to come back next week. Angie Lawrence is our FNEP nutrition educator, and she is going to talk about reading your nutrition facts labels, some helpful tips with that. We'll probably talk about some other labeling on food packages. And just thank you again. Thank you, Mark and Morgan. And email me if you have any questions. And thanks again.